Well, thank you for having us here. We wanted to start by just briefly setting the scene about what the academies are about, what the National Academies Press is trying to do, and what the Research Center is trying to do, because it's a little bit different to how many traditional publishers function. So the academies were set up by Abraham Lincoln to answer questions that needed to be answered for the future of the nation. And over the years, we've had to tackle many pressing and difficult problems, but there's a pop quiz on the second slide. Can anyone tell me what this is? It's a Civil War battle between two ships. And you'll notice, okay, these two at the front are purpose-built iron ships. And in the back, you see these wooden ships, which have had iron bolted to the sides. And you see lots of pictures, portraits of these battles because they were all fought within eyesight of the coastline, because when you bolt cast iron onto the side of a ship, the compasses stop working. And that was the very first question we were asked as an academy to solve, to find out why they were stopping to work, or stop working, which was obvious, and what could be done about that. And we did actually provide an answer. It took less than a year, which is quick for the academies. So 1863, we were founded, the National Academy of Sciences, and as the academies and the work that we were being given grew, it got to a point where the members of the academies, who are elected by the members, it's sort of self-perpetuating oligarchy of the best scientists in the US and around the world, the work got beyond what they were capable of doing. And so they founded the National Research Council, where they could form a committee with a few members on it, and many other people who were the experts from government, industry, or whatever, to answer the questions that needed answering. And it allowed them to do a lot more work as the US was going into the First World War, which increased the questions that were being asked. In 1964, the National Academy of Engineering was constituted as its own thing because there was so much work coming in that particular field. In the 70s, the Institute of Medicine was founded. And then just in 2015, actually the Institute of Medicine became an academy, National Academy of Medicine, and we became known as the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. That's how we publish most of our reports under that name. We do about 200 a year. Of those, maybe 5 or 6 of them are sort of secure things that never see the light of day, that are national security type issues. But the rest are all made available online. And in 1993, the National Academies Press, which actually only came into existence in the late 80s, we claim we're the first self-sustaining, which is important, publisher to provide open access to all of our materials. And back then, that was these sort of page-by-page images of all of our research that we had scanned in our warehouse. So people could read all of our stuff online for free. We still sold print books, always have. And then later in the 90s, we started selling PDFs of our books. And things were good. The data was suggesting that all of this openness that was providing more discovery, more access for people to our research, and that was driving an increase in sales. That data is a little bit spotty, but for the most part, we believe that. And things were good. Our members saw these PDFs that we were selling, and in particular, the people who weren't our members yet, but who were volunteering their time and effort to create these reports, essentially our authors, wanted to use them. Many of these guys and women are lecturers at universities, they work at companies, and once the research was done, they wanted to be able to use their work and use it for free. So we started to get increasing pressure from the membership and from the volunteers to make access to this learning not just be available to read online, because that wasn't a very good experience at the time. It was page by page, it was slow, you had to be online to actually be able to do it, and they wanted to be able to download the PDFs. So we started this process of getting to free. And I was there for a large part of that, not all of it, but it started before I arrived with some research about how much would we lose if we made all of our PDFs available for free. And the number was in the millions. And so we had to figure out what we could do to get there, because we all understood that if we were able to disseminate our PDFs for free, there were some benefits that would accrue to us as an institution that outweighed the loss of revenue that we would suffer as a publisher. And so our first experiment was we made everything available to anyone in the developing world. We followed the World Bank sort of definition of that. And we did that by IP numbers. There were ways you could get around it, but it was, very successful. It was met with sort of great acclaim by our scientific partners around the world, and a lot of downloads started to happen. Then we had our staff, the authors or the people that worked on these reports, coming to us and saying, you did this research about how much money you're going to lose on each report. We want to pay you that money up front, and you make the report available for free from the very get-go. So we started doing that, and there's this transitionary period from 2005 through June 2nd of 2011, where we were doing what was called subsidized PDFs, that some reports were available for free, but not all of them. And in the end, the institution still said, you still need to get to the point where everything is free, which we got to on the 2nd of June 2011. And we saw an immediate spike in traffic to our website. There was a huge spike as people hoarded stuff, believing that we might turn it off later. I think 2 hours after we announced everything was free, we had to send out another email saying, it will always be free, today, tomorrow, next year. Don't hoard everything, because it was taking down our servers. We had 19 load balance servers that can handle a lot of traffic, and they couldn't handle that day. Anyway, we went to free. And those 19 servers, as we've always been an open access looking publisher, we've also supported open access technology. And one of the things I was asked to do was talk a little bit about the technology that we use, and I'm happy to sort of elaborate on that more, but these are all of the things we use. We have an open source platform, which is Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, and we build Lucene into the Linux distribution. And then we have all these things that we use on top of that. All of them are available either for free or for very nominal amounts of money. We have a small team of developers, 4 or 5 people, when we're borrowing people from other departments. But we try to stay standardized on the technologies we're using so that, if one person leaves, the rest of the group can pick up. We don't have any single developer using things that only they use. So as a, oh, no, I was going to show you the website quickly. Okay, so here's our website as it, oh no, I have to, yeah, no. How are we going to do this?
Can you just
Drag it over there? Oh wait, that's that.
or just minimize that?
Dun, dun,
Oh,
dun.
there it is.
All right, this is going to take a little bit of... Ta-da! Okay, but I can't see it here. Oh, I know, wait. All right, I'm just going to have to do it. Okay, so on our website, all of those technologies are being used. Basically, if you're familiar with the concepts of content marketing, what we are trying to do is make available the full text of all the reports. So let me just jump to a page. So all of this is getting indexed by Google, right? So if somebody does a search for anything that might be addressed by one of our reports, our hope is that they're going to land on a page like this, which is hopefully what they're looking for. Good science on the topic that they're trying to research. And from here, we can take them lots of other places. We can have them search inside the book. We can have them get the book. in various different formats. But we've got them sort of in our site, and we're trying to get them to convert. And what we're trying to get, what we really want from them is their email address, and ideally to set up an account on our website so that they can come back in the future, download stuff without having to log in. Now, the reality is that the guest login, you can put in anything. As long as it has an @ and a dot something, you can get to our stuff. And we see a lot of, joe@fake.com or whatever. Some people don't want to give you their email. That's fine. We want you to get the stuff, but we've built in all these things to make it possible to get it more easily if you have a login. We'll keep track of everything you've downloaded. You can sort of modify that list so you can save your sort of curated list of stuff, and you get the content for free. You can search inside the book. You can find related books. And that's basically it. There's a lot behind that, which is driven by that technology, and I can get into that, but I want to get to the data, because that's what we're here to talk about. So let's see if I can get back to... DOIs, yes. So we try to use whatever standard identifiers are needed. So we had ISBNs, of course, and we have DOIs for all of our reports that we have online. And we have had this sort of ongoing effort to digitize our backlist. So with the library's help, that could be a separate presentation, but almost 6,000 titles so far, going back to the 1800s. We've been getting those online, just 20 a month as we keep going. All right, that's our technology stack, so nope, that's not where we want to go. Wait, now do I messed it up.
Click on the slide.
Oh, I want to click on that, and then click on this.
There.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. We're back at the technology. Okay, so what that got us, all of that great technology of search and sort of content marketing that would get people into our website, got people to create accounts. And so I looked this morning, and we are so close to having 1 million accounts. So close. I'm hoping by the end of the year, we certainly will. That'll probably take maybe a week to get there. So those are people who have created logins so they can save the reports that they have and get back to them as a sort of curated list of the things that they've purchased, downloaded, and you can actually save to your list too. Every month we get about 2 million sessions, people coming and doing stuff on our website. And as they're going through and downloading reports, we ask them, would you like to be on our email list? And initially, we had that box pre-populated so that it was easy just to be on our list. And we found a lot of people would unsubscribe really quickly. So we thought, okay, let's uncheck that and see how many people actually actively want to sort of say, opt into this thing. And I was really shocked. I thought the number would be somewhere around 20–30%, but it wavers around 50% of the people are actively saying, I want to download it, and I want to be told about related books. So the email list is about 500,000. Some of those are sort of unengaged, they never open or whatever, so we typically purge those every 6 months, and we hover around 350,000 engaged subscribers. And by engaged, that means they've done something on our site in the last month. And that's who we target. And we know a lot about them, which we'll get to, because that is the source of much of the data. Because we know the behavior of these 1 million people who have accounts on our websites, the books they've saved, plus these 350, 500,000 people who've subscribed. We know where they were, what they were looking at, all those kind of things on our site, and those things were just in our logs. And more forward-thinking program officers and librarians would come to us and say, can you write me a report about this? Or can you write me a report about the usage of that? And we were finding that they were all looking for different numbers, and that's where the conversation started with the library, because we were overwhelmed with all these similar but different requests, and the library was experiencing the same thing.
Okay, that was a good lead up. Thank you. so while Alphonse was doing his publisher thing, I was on the, we're called the Research Center, but basically a library. And so just quick background on us, when the library was formed, our basic mission was just to catalog the print copies of the reports. And so that was kind of our function. And then as electronic resources evolved, then the library started subscribing to things to support the work of the institution. But that original mission kind of was not as important anymore because NAP had then started making all of their reports freely available online. And so we still do catalog in WorldCat, but one of the important things that we just started saying, and I kept pushing Alphonse, was I need you to say that you are the digital repository for the institution. And that was a really big, important part of it, because once people start saying it, then it just becomes true, right?
Right.
So once we started established that, then that kind of helped pave the way for all the other work that we were doing. And so while they were collecting data on downloads for the reports, the library would do a lot of one-off projects for program staff, using or looking at peer-reviewed citations, legislative mentions, press mentions, using Scopus, Web of Science, LexisNexis. And so we would do those one-offs, and then as I sort of took on the responsibility of those requests, I said, well, I don't want to keep writing these searches over and over again. We should put them somewhere so we don't have to keep redoing our own work. And we have the LiveGuides platform. And so then I've spent the last several years creating just individual pages with all the searches for a particular report. And I think I have maybe over 1,000 of them now. And so I went back knocking on Alphonse's door again, and I said, I don't want to take care of these pages anymore. It's getting to be too much work. We really need to collaborate, get everything that the library is doing, and put it into his platform that has all of the usage data, so that there was one common place for staff to go to and get all of this data. So that was kind of how we started our partnership. And so we kind of came up with these initiatives as part of this partnership. So we wanted to determine a common definition, which is not easy, and I will get to that. We wanted to standardize our data taxonomy, develop more the self-service platform NA Exchange that Alphonse and his group are responsible for. And on the library side, I was real interested in coming up with best practice guidelines for staff. How do I find the data? How do I use the data? What can I do with the data? Training on tools and data analysis. I've been teaching I call it Motivational Metrics, and I'm pretty sure I stole that a little bit from Rachel, because she had meaningful metrics, and I didn't want to totally steal her title. And I'm like, well, I'm trying to motivate the staff with these, so I will call it Motivational Metrics, because her book was just a great eye-opener for me when I started my journey with all of this. And so I offer that several times a year for the staff. And then, so, we traveled down this pathway, and then staff were like, well, can you help me create a report that I can deliver to my sponsor? Or can you help me create a report that I bring to my annual board meeting? And I said, sure. I'm not great at graphics, but I will attempt something. And so, I have several phases of these reports that I would extract all the data they were interested in using, try and present it in a meaningful way. And so we had that. So now, once we get everything into our self-service platform, we want to have an automated way of creating reports for staff, so that I don't have to manually process every request, which is incredibly time-consuming. And then finally, agile user-driven development. You want to explain what that
Sure.
means?
Well, the
Yes.
marketing reports
Yes.
are a great example of that. As soon as we launched the sort of reporting platform, even the first generation of it, and presented it to people, the comments we were getting back were like way better ideas on how to develop the platform than we had. Partly because we didn't have contact with the people that they were trying to get the data for, the sponsors and what have you. And so it's our development sort of philosophy anyway on the website. We determined that what we would do is make changes that the users were asking for and make them quickly and not sort of try to impose any kind of, waiting for a whole big feature set and then releasing it all at one go. So we do, like we recently added, was it like Scopus counts or something, or did we take those down again? That was a beta. But so when they have an idea, we listen to what it is, we come up with a technical solution, present it to them, and then release it.
Okay. Any questions? What? Okay. Go to the next one. Okay. How do we define impact in relation to the work of the academies? Where does one start? This is incredibly tricky because I think this often happens with library services. This has kind of been a grassroots level initiative. And so I've been working in my little spot. Alphonse has been working on the publishing side. We got together, but we're still in this middle area. And we have yet to be able to push up to that top ceiling of the institution where we can get someone to say, this is what we want to declare as impact. Because really, I'm comfortable throwing the impact word around. Other people are a lot more touchy about it. When I talk about impact, it's like a lowercase I, right? It really could just mean anything. And for the work of the academies, because we have so many different subjects, that could mean different things for different people, and I'm okay with that. So I took it upon myself to come up with a first round draft of what I thought we could use as a definition for the institution, that being National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And this is supposed to be a conversation starter. And then what I'd like it to do is trickle down to our different program units, and then they can create, their own impact definition, because some, and it may even trickle down to, by projects. Some projects, all we really care about are federal agencies. Other projects are more, driven towards public. And so everything, each and every one is going to be kind of different. But I thought it was important that perhaps we start somewhere. And no one would do it. You just couldn't get anyone to come up with something. So we recently rebranded. And so I tried to take the wording out of the rebrand to sort of make the branding people happy. And so I said it's the measurable evidence of change a report, workshop, summary, or other activity makes in the development of federal laws and regulations, effectiveness of government programs, shaping the direction of research fields, and informing public knowledge about issues of critical importance. So those are like our 4 things that we talk about. So I tried to go real broad there. And then me being a librarian, I keep trying to educate. And so, the ability to collect and communicate this evidence is essential so that we can, boost new business development, attract collaborative partners, because we work so much with academics, we can help them enhance their researcher profiles with all of this. And so this was our first round draft. And we haven't really circulated this yet. I think we're getting there in 2018. We're probably going to do perhaps another round of presentations or something with this. But we're just really trying to get people to think about it. And we do a lot of one-on-ones with people. I think it's more effective that way than doing the big group presentations, because then you can really get someone to sit down and just say, well, what do you want to do? What story do you want to tell about your board or whatnot? And so, in fact, we just had another one yesterday where we sat and I said, boy, I feel like we've had this conversation 4,000 times, and we'll probably have it another 4,000. But so that's kind of where we are with defining impact, and it's a journey for sure. And we're just going to keep trying to work towards getting people to define it for themselves. Our Health and Medicine Division has a very developed impact scale. And they just reworked theirs, and so we're waiting for them to come back to us with theirs, because then we'll have kind of an example to walk around the institution with and say, you too can do this. So, yes.
Have you talked with your authors about this?
So one.
It seemed to me that it would be in their best interest as well, because the impact your publication that they have authored, done research for, reflects back to them.
Right.
So we have.
Put their own scholarly profile together.
Right.
Right, because of the kind of work that we do, so we have these committees who, they're actually, so we have a corporate author. The author of our reports is the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, because the committees, there's no one specific person who is writing a piece of it or whatever. They don't get like absolute, we're publishers here, absolute authorship, they get contributor credit. And their motivation or interests for that work that they've done are twofold. If they're in academia, they're trying to sort of use it to enhance their, their tenure track and what have you. If they're in industry or in government, there's still this sort of reputational thing attached to serving on a committee of the National Academy of Sciences. And in many cases, they're trying to become members. So, they serve on a lot of committees, come to the attention that it's a path for them. However, it's really the staff who we call the RSO, the Report Supervising Officer or something, like the person who's in charge of the report, who for us is the author, because they're the person who has to take that thing to the agency and say, here's the work that we did. Look, we have metrics to show that good things came from this. How about funding another one? And so we have the RSOs who are trying to show that that report had impact or outcomes. Then we have the board directors who are trying to use that report and other ones to show that their board can do good work and develop future business. And then the third sort of motivation or interest that has use of these metrics are internal management staff who now have an opportunity to benchmark reports that have sort of stated similar goals against each other. And that's phase 5 or something, but that's one of the things that our management is interested in as they look at workflow. We've got these similar reports. This one was a great success by these measures, and this one wasn't. Why is that? So we can improve.
So much of it is our own institutional metadata that we collect. And so while the institutional metadata is not under our purview, that is another project that's going on, and we're trying to influence. We don't field funder data like in our project database, and they're not individual committee names. So it creates a really big trying to
standardize the data taxonomy.
Standardize our data technology.
Right. Right. So the standardized data technology. So we have this very broad definition of impact, and we recognize that there is no single nomenclature, taxonomy, or whatever that is going to work for all of our reports, because they have very different goals. We have some reports that literally the goal is that one guy or girl reads it. It might be, the head of the Treasury Department or whatever, but that's their entire goal, is that one person reads that report. They don't care about the public, about academic conferences or whatever, but then there are other ones where it's about public education, and the metrics are all about how many people download it, saw it, and what have you. So What we're trying to do is make sure that we have a standardized data taxonomy for all of the different elements that might make up what you consider impact for your report. So if it is presented on the Hill and people from these senators' staff offices showed up, we would like to be able to show that. Or if it's this many people looked at the catalog page, we would like to be able to show that. And when we do show that, we're going to count it in a standard way. Because one of the things that we were finding when we presented web stats primarily to people was that they would pick and choose. Which one, somebody would do page views, the other person would do sessions, and so you couldn't do that benchmarking down the road. And when you were trying to roll up those outcomes, which the board directors wanted to do for business development, it was really very hard to do so. So, being a responsible publisher, of course, all our books had ISBNs. And we had this data structure where we have a record ID for the report, well, for the project, I should say. And below that, there are different ISBNs. The ebook has one, the PDF has one, the paperback, the hardcover, the online version, all are separate, but can be rolled up so that we can tell you what happened for that project, the record ID. And to that, we then started adding all this other data that we had. So we could roll up traffic to all of our web properties on the record ID level. We could roll up the downloads of the paperback, the PDF, the ebooks and what have you to the record ID level. And as people were doing that, all of the metrics that we have about our users, about where they're located, the domains, so .gov, .state suffixes and what have you, all of that we could roll up to the record ID level with a view to then presenting it in that rolled up way and standardizing those, what we consider internal data points that we gathered ourselves. And then we worked with the library on the external ones to do more or less the same.
Right. And so we, we're writing, because we don't have the individual authors, looking for citation counts in Scopus and Web of Science was kind of tough. And so we write our little expert searches for each of these. And like I said, I was curating all of this in live guides. And so I'm tired of that. So now we're going to roll it into Alphonse's platform that we're going to show in a minute, NA Exchange. But then we also, I really wanted Altmetrics and didn't have any money. And so I knocked on Alphonse's door and I said, I really think this would benefit both of us. And fortunately, he found some money. And so we do have the Altmetric donut on the publisher page. And then, I feed it into my live guides and, it's kind of all over the place. But it's given us a whole nother set of data to work with. And then we write searches for legislative mentions and also for collecting press mentions in Lexis. So again, getting all of that stuff into NA Exchange is going to be really important. And this is NA Exchange.
So you should be able to click on the link at the top. Yes.
Have you considered also Google Scholar?
Yes. Yeah, so we provide them with a customized way to get to our website, and they have metrics there, but they unfortunately don't provide the metrics from Google Scholar in a way that we can ingest it. We have been speaking with them, and that's one of the things that we want to do in the future is do even more work around getting interactions with our work that are happening on other people's platforms, get metrics from those back. The big one for us is PubMed, where almost all of our medical stuff, if it's funded by NIH, which is 90% of it, it's all on PubMed too. And a lot of it, like if you search for our books, the first place you're going to get pointed is PubMed. And so there are all these interactions that are happening there that we currently.
The biggest difficulty about tracking impact for the academies is that no one ever calls us by the same name. It could be National Academy of Engineering, NASEM, or they just say a report was written and they don't even mention us. And so that's why constructing the searches in Scopus and Web of Science usually falls to the library because it's a complicated search string of title and author or, you know, all that lovely stuff. And it's the same thing when we're searching for the legislative mentions and the press mentions. There are these very long search strings. And they're just
Right.
so silly, but that we're, you know, that's what we're going to have to do. And we were hoping once we
Years.
for 3 years, yeah, really, to get our selected titles indexed with them. But then part of the problem is that they're collecting separate metrics. So there are the ones for the landing page of the report that's indexed, and then there are citations for the cited references, and they're not rolling that stuff up. So it's real messy, but slowly we're filtering, you know, everything into one place, and I feel like we're really ahead of the game.
Yeah, so we were the first to using ones to be working with Scopus. We take a platform that was developed for journals to make it work for our metrics, and that took years. We had to go to our executive officer at the time, who had a friend who was on the board of Elsevier, who could speak to the people at Scopus, was it?
Yes.
Yeah, and tell them this stuff is worthwhile as a journal. Don't call it grey literature, and tell the librarians and technical people it shouldn't be indexed. Because we would contact them and they would say, oh no, it's grey literature, we don't do that, we do journals. So we had to go all the way to the top level, and then we had a meeting in the cafeteria with this guy, and he's like, oh yeah, I understand. You know, and he emailed one person and we were off, but then we had all the challenges, the mundane stuff of how their platform works, because it works for journals. And a lot of the big ideas everyone agrees on. It's the work of actually, you know, getting it to work, which is mundane but difficult. So we are on the Academy's VPN now, and we are looking at NA Exchange, which is the platform that we make available to staff. So let me actually go back one. I've got to go here. All right, this is very tricky. Okay. So you land on this splash page, and you get a sort of brief rundown of what is happening today, downloads, sales, that kind of stuff. If we scroll down, you see comments as people who are logged in are downloading things. We say, hey, why are you using this? And they, surprisingly, 30% of the time, say something. Sometimes it's really meaningful.
It's gold.
Yeah.
I mean, that anecdotal evidence that you need.
But let me go, where am I? Where's my mouse? Oh, there it is. Okay, let me go to a report. I'm going to this one with a bit of trepidation, because this one has a lot of activity, and that might make things a bit slow. But this was released, what, like last year? And so the first thing we do is we show staff like how the report ranks in, you know, all of our reports. Consensus study reports are a particular type of activity we do. We have, those are the blue ribbon products that we do, and then we have workshop summaries and proceedings, which are convening activities, and then within the topic that it's in, how does it sort of rank? That was a kind of trying to fire competitive spirits about, let me see how mine is doing versus this other board. And then there are some things that allow, this is for communications officers to be able to come and get links, like so that they can use it in their communications. And then we get down, so this is all just bibliographic information that most publishers would have. But here on the left, you see the actual metrics that we're going to use. So let me start with, so these are download. Catalog page is the page where you see all the different ways that you can get the report. So typically you can get the online version, the PDF version, the print version, Kindle, EPUB, and then all of the ancillary materials, because we typically have what we call highlights, which is a 4 to 8 page summary of it, the press release, infographics, whatever else there is. The little gray lines you see are coming from our email system telling us when we did promotion for this thing, so that if there are spikes in something, we can attempt to explain it. It might be attendance at a conference, an email, or whatever. So you can, try to drill down and figure out, okay, we went to this conference. There were a lot of downloads. Were there sales too? So we see that. Does that say reset Zoom? It does, right?
I can't see it.
Oh no, it says export data. I didn't mean to do that. Okay, you can export all the data. You can look at it monthly, and again, this is similar data. Just download, sales, catalog page, and then open book pages is how many pages have been read online. Because even though it's actually a scrolling interface, we're counting where the breaks in the book are. So we know that, which page is the most popular and that kind of stuff. So those are the sort of traffic-based metrics. Then we have the Altmetrics, and this is why I was a little nervous about doing this one, because this one has a fairly high Altmetric score, and we're getting this data live off their platform. This is what we paid the money for. And they have a very good API, so we're able to call that in. We actually do store that stuff on our systems as well, so that we can go back historically and look at it.
The other
Yes.
interesting piece about the slide you were just, is that it shows where it looks like a report comes out and there's high use.
Yeah,
But there's a good long tail as well.
there is.
And being able to justify that long tail is probably just as important over time.
Absolutely, and we have, again, a slightly unusual thing in that we do a what we call a pre-pub. So we generally release it to a sponsor and the press as a pre-publication, and then make it available on our website. Sometimes you can buy the print as well. We put that in POD, but most of the time you can just download the pre-pub. And then 2 or 3 months go by, and then we release the final report with pretty charts, graphics, infographics. So we have this 2 spikes of releases. And we have a lot of reports that, because we're looking at, the future of US policy on, at 1 o'clock today we're doing Making Medicine Affordable, which you'll hear about on the news. That has a long tail. So, it was presented to the Senate yesterday, and they were all excited about it and what have you. So there'll be some action around it now, but nothing will happen until a year, maybe 2 down the line, when people have actually had a chance to look at all the recommendations. Okay, this is how we can do it. And it starts impacting the communities that care about this stuff, whether it be big pharma or people working in public health. So we have tons of these reports that get a lot of attention a long time after they come out, and then we have even more reports that get a little bit of attention because they're basic research in that field. We have these reports from the 70s on permafrost something or other, which every 2 years they have a conference in Russia, and then the other year it's in the US, and we see those spikes, when they go to that. But all right, so Altmetrics. So you see news, you see blogs, Wikipedia, Twitter, Facebook, Google, videos, and policy documents, which are really important for us. It's because it's the cannabis report. It's, I picked it deliberately. It's one of the higher ones. No pun intended, I like that.
Has been great because the uptake in peer review takes a while, and we had Lexis for press, but that requires them requesting me to write a search. I'm not just doing it for everything because I don't have the manpower to do that. So having the donut has been great because it's just automatically set up, and then we also have it on the nap.edu, the public page. And so because all of this is internal, that's nice because we can then point sponsors. Say you want to follow this yourself, just go to the page and you can see the uptick, online. So.
And the justification that Colleen sold me on when we bought Altmetric was that when people are doing searches for something that is recently released, they're not going to see any citations in Web of Science or Scopus and what have you, but they will see attention in Altmetrics. So when you do a search results page, you display the Altmetrics score, and they have something that tells them this one is, recent and important and what have you. And so we do see quite a lot of usage of it on our website. So that's one of the external data sources. The other one is Scopus, where we've sort of described some of the problems we have. I bet it is in Scopus, but it wasn't cited in whatever way they're looking for, because we sort of have this problem with authorship. If it wasn't cited in exactly the way they're looking for, it just doesn't show up. And we're working with them to try to get sort of all of the possible ways it was cited rolled up into their system, which they do for journals, but in a sense of the different citation styles. So.
And then
We'll
that's
get
where
there.
we're going to add, we'll add Scopus, Web of Science, LexisNexis, and then, it'll still require manpower to write the search, but then once we've done it, it's archived, it lives in there. And Scopus is great because they have the permalinks, and so then all staff have to do is click on it. Web of
Right.
Science is in the dark, and you have to launch through their platform. But I'm excited to get all my stuff in there.
Right. So as a remnant of making the PDFs free to the developing world, we were looking at the IP numbers of people who were trying to track, who were trying to download our stuff. And we thought, hey, we could use that data and present it to staff people so they could see where people are downloading their reports, because they care about that. Our agriculture people, really care about, Latin America downloads a lot of our agriculture stuff, basically because they're using similar technologies, growing similar crops. But so you can look, at a country level, you can look at states in the US, and it'll tell you numbers. And, occasionally we get requests to look at an even lower level than that. So we had a request about one particular report, and people wanted to know whether people in the state capital, Sacramento, California, had read this report, and we were able to use the IP numbers to isolate the IP range of the state government and say, yeah, there were 5 downloads that went to that IP range.
It's not creepy or anything.
How we used them, right? Well,
I know. My favorite is the domains.
that's where we're going.
Yeah.
So with domains, the other thing we care about is whether policymakers, academics, commercial people are using that. Domains are not as useful as they might first appear, because so many people are using their personal Gmail to sort of gather stuff, just in case they're no longer at, Merck Pharmaceutical next week. They still have all their stuff. But this tells us sort of by. So let's look at is that .gov? There it is, right? All right. So if we look at .gov, it'll tell us all the different .govs that have downloaded stuff. And this is really important for our staff, because if they can say that we know that people in state DOTs or whatever are using this thing, then that's very useful to them.
Like you said, that's only if they use that email.
It's only if they use that email, because that's not actually coming from the IP number. This is coming from the login, and you can give whatever email you want there. Yeah. So then, again, from the people who are logged in and are downloading and are commenting, we have all of their comments. So the first thing we recognized was, ding dong, privacy problem. First, make internal staff even agree that they're not going to share it or do anything. So we take all of the comments and we mine it for keyword pairs, and then we present all of those. So if they're looking for a particular thing that might, we see here personal reference, inform myself, these are very typical in lots of them. But if we were looking at an agriculture book, you might see potassium uptake or something like that, and that might inform, future studies or whatever.
This is what people write in.
That's what they write, yeah.
Download.
Yeah.
Why do you use this or something?
Yeah. And so we have, if you sort them, again, there are going to be a lot of comments on this one.
Then you get to the meteor comments.
People get really personal about what they're doing. Now, I'm showing you a cannabis one, which is sort of funny, but when we have some of these comments are absolutely harmful. and yet really validating to our staff to see that people who are providing in-home care for a cancer patient are saying, hallelujah, I finally found something that is, giving me direction and what have you. But, and these kind of anecdotes can be used when they go back to the agencies and are trying to, it's all great passing out numbers about, oh, we had 12,000 downloads.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Then we just kind of clean them up. We make them, we take out personally identifying information.
Right.
We'll say a professor from a university, did this with
Yeah.
it or whatnot.
So we do what we can in an automated way. So we take out the actual someone, but sometimes they put it in the body, so we have to strip that out too. And then, okay, where are we? So the last thing is, then we try to sort of relate back all the campaigns that were done for a particular report. And so these are the various ones that came out for that report.
That's where all our data is going to live, including
Right.
my stuff.
So that's where we're trying to land it. And at the moment, we have all that data gathered at the record ID level. And as, we have a sort of a three-pronged approach to the development. It is get more data, use it in different ways, and have outputs that are useful for the staff. At the moment, they just have to export the data and create their own thing.
Right. So we've got all this data, right? We're kind of working at this backwards. And so now we're trying to work on process for the institution. How can we use all of this data? So I talked about,
Oh, we got to do the magic thing again. Let me see if I remember
What was
how
the
we
magic
did it.
click?
We went, was it here? And then you went.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
So I have this running document, and I'm trying to just come up with some best practice guidelines. Every institution loves their written guidelines, right? But I feel like if I say it is so, and then I get this onto our internal website, that may then sort of be that upward movement in the institution. And so in the class that I teach, I'm trying to get staff to understand we need them to think about, I'm just going to say lowercase impact, at the beginning of their project. Because what's happening right now is I've got all this great data, I'm all, yeah, and then I read the statement of task, but they're really quite broad, and there's no brainstorming done at the beginning to say, this is really the impact that we want to see happen from this report. And so I don't have a way to connect the data to the questions that they want to ask. And so we're trying to get staff to start doing this at the beginning of a study. So, they conduct a study and they identify what impacts they think they're going to see from this study. And then as they're planning their dissemination strategy, we can detail out what they're going to do, what kind of data we're going to collect in order to try and analyze these questions. And then, as we go kind of around the circle there, then once that's all detailed out in the beginning and we have this lovely automated internal platform for staff that's doing all of the work and they don't have to do anything, after we publish, then they are ready to report the results to sponsors and then in turn use that information to develop new business. So then we come back full circle. So this is something that I haven't really socialized yet. In words I've said it, but I haven't really brought this out formally, and so we're getting there, little by little. So one of the things in my class I've been trying to show them how to do is just a simple roadmap when they're at the beginning of their project to kind of detail out what they're doing. And then I even have, I love Excel, so I even have an Excel spreadsheet where they can put things in it, and just in an effort to try and get them to really just start thinking about this. And I've been sort of teaching this for the last year and a half, and I do have an uptick of staff coming to me now, and I sit down with them one-on-one, and I say, what do you want to know? That's basically what I start with. and then we just start the conversation. And like I said, we had this conversation with is Anne-Marie a board director?
She is a board director, yes.
A board director, and so we had this conversation with her yesterday. We said it really boils down to what do you want to know? It could be anything. It doesn't matter.
Right.
So starting at the beginning of a project is essential. Because right now I'm kind of just grasping at straws when I create these impact reports for people. I'm like, well, this might be interesting. So that's why I like the domains, because I can say, oh, there's been, a lot of downloads at the university level. There's been a lot of downloads at government agencies. And so it's what I imagine people would like to know about our reports right now. So we're trying to get just more detailed in how staff want to communicate about impact. So I have gone through many iterations of I call them impact reports, and I have absolutely no graphic skills whatsoever. And so that is when I went back to Alphonse and I said, we have all this data and I'm making these really ugly things. I need you to help me make it look pretty. And so he has staff that can do that. And so this is, what I did. It didn't click. Phooey, hold on. There it is. There we go.
You have to drag it over to the other screen.
Oh, how do I do that? This is why we're a team, right? So every year, the Academies puts out this publication called the Report to Congress. And they, the higher-ups choose a set of reports that they want to highlight. What this doesn't have, and mostly because they're really only like a year old, there's a lot of impact information in it. And so what I tried to do was the library's follow-up report to the report to Congress. And so it's just something that I release internally.
So if you scroll down.
Right here.
Actually, I think this one isn't. The report to
no.
Congress can be downloaded. I know that.
Mine is not available publicly. I would love for it to be public, but it would have to go through many levels of permissions before we could do that. But that really is where I'm headed. I really would love to see it be a part of this, at the back or something. So, so now we have this lovely, beautiful report, so much nicer than mine.
Hit the page down.
And, the arrow?
Page down.
There we go. Okay. So here we tried to just do a little bit of data aggregation based on our topics. And so just kind of showing dissemination and downloads. And then I think it is so important when you are presenting any kind of data to provide context so that people understand where it's coming from and what they're looking at. So we came up with about this report. And then, again, this is my education piece that I keep trying to get program staff to think about. When I'm looking at this data, what kinds of questions can I ask so that we keep working towards the whole analysis piece. And then our sources, which we've already told you about. And hold on, boop, boop, boop. I want to get down to and then we did a page for each report. So basically I just was, manually exporting all of the data out of any exchange, out of all of my searches that I was doing, and then just kind of analyzing it in my own way, and then trying to put it in a more marketing-friendly format. And so we just have highlights, which is mostly about downloads and where it's showing in the press. I like what I said. I like the domains because then we can talk about who is reading our report, and then we can show peer-reviewed citations, and then I just kind of highlight some of the top journals that are citing. And then, for us, we want to know what government agencies are interacting with the report, so I can use that data. I love those first-hand accounts. Those are gold, so we put a couple of those on there. And then I don't call it Altmetric because that might confuse people, so I just say online attention. I don't use the donut because the score only ever goes up, and it's hard to explain the score. So it was better just to show, action in each of the different areas that Altmetric curates. And so my goal was then to have this for program staff, and then they can kind of just tear and go, right? Oh, yeah, I would love to give this to my sponsor, and so they could use that. So this is our new and improved, new branding-friendly report, and he has some lovely, lovely developers that I do not have on my staff, and so now what they're working to do is automate this for me, so that everything will be in an NA exchange, and then it will drive the reporting. And I mean, I could just do a whole lot of happy dances up here because it really takes me a long time to do this because it's all manual exports and everything. But it was worth the time because I think it's helped get us to where we are in the institution with our ability to report about impact. Any questions about that? No? Okay.
I didn't notice, and it may be there, I didn't notice. Is there a date of creation on here? So
Yeah, I think at the very bottom,
Okay.
I have when I ran the search,
Exactly.
and I have the
Valid
suggested.
as of such and
I have
such a
I have
date.
my own suggested citation at the bottom. Well, because I thought, well, this is going to get, I want them to come back to the
Right.
person that made it so that if they need any more information. So I do have that when I ran the search and all that kind of
Right.
stuff. So that is at the very bottom. Now, how do I get
Putting
that?
in those journals is pretty cool because you've got the heavy hitters right there.
Yes, and that's all done with the Scopus Analyzer tool, and then I just export it, so I love that tool. Now, how do I get back to our presentation? I didn't actually do that. We're almost done.
Let me see. Okay.
And we have a really loyal group of followers now of all of these services and the data.
Right.
And people are on board, and those of us that are working in the trenches are all on board for this. But I told you the really tough part is bridging that divide up to the executives because this stuff is important to them, but it's not their main priority. So figuring out how to get this to them so that it can become part, it really does support what their main priorities are, but I think they just don't have a lot of time to think about it.
Right. So hopefully these future things we're going to do are going to help the board level people who are quite close to an individual report are essentially getting most of what they wanted. They could get it faster in more automated ways, but our more senior managers want to see things in aggregate. They want to see all the reports that a board put out. And our system doesn't do that right now. You have to export all the individual ones and roll them up. So one of the first things we want to do is have aggregate level reporting so you can see all of these outcomes that occurred based on which organizational unit, whether it is. So we have divisions and then boards. And so to be able to do it by either one. So a board director, which is one level up, can do it, and then the executive director of the division can do it for their annual meeting or whatever. So that's that bit. The other bit is there's a lot of manually curated outcome that comes from our Office of News and Public Information, who, you saw the news score in Altmetric. That typically, sometimes it's repeating the same story. You get a syndicated AP story that might show up 10 times, and our news people know that's one story. They spoke to one reporter, and so.
Tracked by DOI.
Right. Yeah. So they can put in things where they know what happened, and they can put that in manually and what have you. Congressional affairs, there's a lot of nuance to how our reports are used in a legislative way. Sometimes, there are bills that are put out there that everybody knows are not going anywhere, and our report is mentioned in that. We care less about that than an actual bill that went through and, referenced our report, tangentially or whatever. And the congressional affairs people are former Hill staff that understand all of this and can manually curate that content. And then the program units also, as these things happen, they speak to the volunteers who are on the committee who are passing them things that they may have heard. And in many cases, especially when you get the reports of the type, we care about one person reading it. They're at a cocktail party and that one person says, oh, I read that report, that was great. Now they have a place to record that. So the emails that we're capturing in our system at the moment, we only really use those to, when the next report about, the health effects of cannabis comes out, we can email those people and say, hey, we did another report about that, you might be interested in it. What our program officers were saying, the comments that we're getting when people download that report, and we're asking them, how are you going to use it? Why can't we ask them 6 months, a year later, how did you use it and did you find it to be effective? Because that's better information for us than your sort of aspiration for this thing. So that's another piece that we need to do that we're working on. And then we're also trying to collect new and improved data. So internal data, external data, Counter is this, it's a standard that, in theory, will let you read the usage of your resources on somebody else's website. So that's, we're trying to push NIH to implement that on PubMed and Department of Education to do it on ERIC and people like Google to use these open source type things so that we can gather all of that without them sending us monthly reports in weird formats that, don't match our stuff. ORCID is something that particularly Colleen is very interested in. That you can roll up to a DOI, and we're trying to get them to allow that to happen. And then, we want to make our data available. Part of the reason we're here is because we want to share so that other people can do these kind of things, and we can provide our data, and people can do research about the impact of science on policy and what have you. And then lastly, I was talking briefly about our website and some of the tools over the years in terms of search and relationships and allowing people to find content. We call those our labs, right? So we had Academy Scope, some of you may have heard of, an API for providing data, which actually exists in XML for lots of catalogers and libraries and what have you already. But we have this cool new plugin, which I just want to show you quickly, and then we can take some questions now. Where are we? So for a long time, we've had this thing on our website called Reference Finder. And Reference Finder lets you take a block of text and put it in, and then you hit a button, and then it tells you, oh, these Academies reports talk about that thing, right? And so then you can go to those reports and do more research. And so that gets used a lot by a very relatively small number of people because you need to be, where's that Guardian thing? Oh, there we are, okay. You need to be, on our website with a block of text and to do that. So what we did is we developed a plugin that will work with any website that is tagged in a reasonable way about any topic. And so this one is about sea level rise. And where's the plugin? It's up here somewhere, right?
I think.
Is that it?
Yeah, it's like a teeny tiny little plugin.
What does that say? Does that say something about National Academies? No. No?
Oh, that's Cisco. Go to the right.
All right.
Yeah.
That one. All right, so you hit a button, and then it says, hey, we're going to find reports related to this if you want to know more. Is this fake news? Is this good science? Is it whatever? What has the Academies done about this? So we take the text of that article, dump it into Reference Finder, compare the text of that against the texts of all of our reports, and then tell you that if you want to do research about that, we've got some stuff for you.
And all of that happened in the
Blink of an eye, yeah. Now, depending on how long that article is, it can take longer, and depending on how hard it has to look for something. And it is possible that it'll say we don't have anything, because there's a sort of relevancy cutoff. But that's our latest little tool we're playing with that we're
I'm
hopefully
really
going to...
excited about this because he just showed this to me today. But what's really
Right.
cool is then when we're delivering literature reviews, staff could say, oh my gosh, this article is exactly what I was thinking. Have we written a report on this? They can do this in a quick fashion instead of coming to us and saying, can you do these keyword searches and help me mine to see all this? So this is fabulous. I'm excited about this one.
Well, two things immediately come to mind. First of all, is that available for like a lot of different browsers?
No, so at the moment, you can only use it in Chrome and in developer mode. And so that's what we're still working on. It'll be released as a Chrome extension initially, and then we might do a Firefox one, but the vast majority of our users, well, not vast, but over 50% are using Chrome. So that's why we started there. It will never be an IE extension. My developers would like kill me if I asked them to do that.
And then I guess this maybe wouldn't apply, but like, what about going reverse? Like, from your reports, like maybe you have no interest in doing that, but like related reports
From other people.
scientific, like,
Right.
here's our report.
That's part of,
Same thing.
yeah.
Like, what's
So we would love to be able to do that. And part of what we hope for our API is that it's done in such a way so that we can use the repositories of other publishers who are providing open text. However, they're few and far between. They typically are using sort of proprietary ways of coding that stuff. So there is a real technological sort of barrier to doing that at the moment. That's actually one of the things that we've experimented with using Google Books and Google Scholar. At least there's a lot of stuff there in a fairly standardized way. So yeah, we would love to do that. Technically, I think it's very difficult. You know, even with people who we work with all the time, like Rand and Brookings, who even distributed at one point, their stuff's sort of all over the place, and it's just not a good experience.
There is a new vendor,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard it. It's YEWNO, and they have a platform that it's kind of doing something like that. Well, they will ingest your digital collection, and then
Right.
that's exactly what it does. Then it connects out to the other scholarly literature that, and they do this whole concept mapping thing, and
Right.
they have a proprietary algorithm for all of that. If you haven't seen the product, you should look at it. It's pretty neat.
It is.
We're going to run a couple trials in 2018 just to kind of see what we can see, and I don't know.
Yeah, it has an interface that's really similar to Academy Scope for the relevance, but it's not just one publisher's titles, it's many publishers'
Right.
titles. And then it's a little bit like an Academy Scope on steroids. You know, it's you can click on the relevance paths, and it's
Yeah.
very nice.
Our PowerPoint, yes?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so you can,
So unfortunately, you won't be able to see NAX. That's behind our firewall.
it's a screenshot.
So
maybe